Ta-da! Hello kids, welcome to another art lesson. Today I have another video on shading. And this time we're gonna be using the cross-hatching technique. What is cross-hatching? It's basically a traditional design element that is used for lighting and shading our drawings. First, I'm gonna grab my Yabba Dabba yellow marker and I'm gonna draw some simple shapes on my paper. One of them is gonna be a sphere and the other is gonna be a cube. Since yellow is a lighter color, it's perfect for sketching my drawing first. Once I'm happy with the sketch, then I'm gonna refine it with a thick black marker, as we usually do. Sphere is easy, it's just a simple circle. But for the cube, I'm gonna use an easy method. First, I'm drawing a square, and then another square that is slightly moved to the upper right side of the first square. The first square will be the front face of my cube, and the second one will be the back side of it. Lastly, I'm gonna connect all the corners of these two squares. There we have a transparent looking cube and a sphere. Next, I'm gonna place my light source on my paper, so we know which direction the light is coming from. I'm gonna draw my light source on the upper right corner of my paper. Now it's time to redraw our shapes with a thick black marker so that we can see them better. Drawing the sphere is easy, it's just straightforward. Just draw over the circle with your thick black marker. But when we come to the cube, it's a little trickier than the sphere. We don't want our final cube to look transparent, so we're not gonna draw over all the lines, but just some of them. We're gonna draw all edges of the first square. But for the second square on the back, we're only gonna be drawing the upper and the right edges of that square. I don't wanna confuse you, so kids, you're very smart. You can just watch the video and try to do it like how I'm doing it. To finish up my cube, I'll be connecting the three corners of both of the squares with diagonal lines. And there we have it, a perspective cube drawn with an easy method. There are three yellow lines that I didn't go over with my black marker, and that's because those are on the back side of the cube and we're actually not going to be seeing them. Now we're ready for shading. Let's grab our thinner black marker, because the thick outlines are just for the forms, but for lighting and shading we'll need a thinner marker or a pencil or a pen. Since the light source is on the upper right corner, the top parts and the right parts of our objects are going to be illuminated. They're gonna look lighter than the rest of the object. The bottom parts and the left parts of the objects will look darker, because those parts will not be receiving as much light. The cross-hatching technique is basically drawing a bunch of parallel lines. The closer we draw these lines to each other, the darker that part of the object will look. And if we want to make some parts even darker, then we draw another set of parallel lines, but in a slightly different direction. The trick here is, once I start to shade a part of the object with cross-hatching, I don't change the direction of my lines until I'm done with that part. Sphere has a curved surface, so I'm trying to get a smooth transition from dark to light while shading my sphere. My goal is to make that sphere look as volumetric as I can. Here is another tip. If you look carefully, the lit part of my sphere is going to look somewhat like a circle, but the shaded part of my sphere is going to look like a crescent moon. I'm adding more and more cross-hatching as I'm coming closer to the lower left part of my sphere, because that part is on the opposite side with the light source. The parts of the forms that are closer to my light source are going to look lighter, and the opposite parts are going to look darker. To make my forms look like they're standing on a surface, I'm going to add some shadows. The shadow of the sphere will be an ellipse, and I'm drawing that ellipse towards the lower left corner of my sphere. I'm gonna use my cross-hatching technique to shade inside of that shadow. But this time, since the surface is flat, I'm not trying to make a smooth transition, but just a dark, shaded ellipse. I'm gonna use angled lines, I'm gonna use horizontal lines, I'm gonna use vertical lines, I'm gonna use lines in all directions until I reach that darkness that I want. Alright, that looks pretty good. Our sphere is shaded and it even has a shadow on the ground. Now, it's time to shade our cube with the new cross-hatching technique we learned. We'll treat the cube a little different than the sphere because all of the faces of the cube are flat. Unlike the sphere, cube doesn't have any curved surfaces, so it won't have any smooth transitions. Instead, each of the faces will have a different level of darkness. If a face is facing towards the light, it's gonna look lighter than the other faces. So the top part of our cube is going to be the lightest because the light is looking directly towards that part of the cube. The right side of the cube is still gonna be light but a little darker than the top side. But the front side of the cube that is facing to us is going to be the darkest, because it receives almost no light since it's facing away from the light source. The trick here is trying to keep the lines evenly spaced, and since all of these surfaces are flat, we're trying to avoid creating transitions from dark to light. I'm not even touching the top part of my cube because it's gonna look the lightest, and I just used one set of lines for the right side of the cube because it's going to be a middle tone between the top side and the front side. But for the front side of my cube, I'm gonna use a few set of lines, each time in a different angle. The thing about cross-hatching or any piece of art is patience. Try not to get bored when you're drawing your lines, because if we can keep our focus till the end, our design will look beautiful. You may be asking yourself, why am I drawing all these lines? Why am I not coloring inside these faces? The reason is lines are beautiful. They are very beautiful design elements, and the more lines we see in a drawing, the richer that drawing is. Now it's time to draw the shadow of my cube on the ground. Just watch the shape I'm drawing and try to draw a similar shape for the shadow of your cube. It will kind of look like a rectangle with diagonal edges. And to shade inside of my shadow shape, I'm gonna use my cross-hatching technique again. And since the shadow is on a flat surface, there's not gonna be any smooth transition in my shading. Alright, it's looking pretty good. I mean, I love it. I'm sure yours looks better than mine, but still, I like mine too. I just want to add a few more lines to my sphere to reveal its shape even better. And this time, I'm gonna use curved lines instead of straight lines. You heard me right. Cross-hatching doesn't always have to be with straight lines. You can use curved lines too. Just try to make them evenly spaced and draw them in the same direction. Now, I can see even better that the lit part of my sphere looks like a circle and the shaded part of my sphere looks like a crescent moon. And ta-da! I love lighting and shading, and I love drawing.